Good morning. Glad to have you all back in class once again. I hope that the vocab quiz wasn't too hard for you. As always, hope you studied for that. Let's get right into it. Chapter 6, the First Chinese Empires. We're going to be looking at different schools of thought in ancient China. And as you recall from our introduction, we're going to be looking at the differing philosophies of legalism and Confucianism, the Qin and Han dynasties, and how those things help govern China. Our essential question for this section is, how can differing philosophies influence a culture? Okay, so here's our bell ringer. This is from the Analects of Confucius. The Analects is a book of Confucian sayings, sort of like a Bible, so to speak, of different things that Confucius advocated for or spoke on. So here's our first Confucian Analect. The master said, "At first, when it came to people, I listened to their words and trusted their conduct. Now, when it comes to people, I listen to their words and I observe their conduct." Our first question is, what do you think this quotation from Confucius really means? Take a few seconds, develop a philosophy on that, and get back to me. Well, Confucius is saying that he used to trust people to do what they said they would do, but now he watches people to make sure that they will do what they say. Now, this is something that I almost exclusively live my life by. I trust people. I do trust them. And I do believe that they will do what they will say. But at the same token, I observe and I watch and I understand that people don't always do what they say they're going to do. They can't always be trusted to do what they say. Do you think this quotation from Confucius is still relevant today? Yeah, probably so. People still do not always do what they say, the things that they say they're going to do. So it is up to you to discern between those people. Don't always, Confucius says, don't always just trust unknowingly, trust unfoundedly, that people must prove themselves worthy of trust. So let's dive right into Confucianism. As the Zhou dynasty collapsed, three schools of thought promoted social stability. Our chart here at the bottom from left to right are showing us ways to improve social stability. There's a quotation from its school of thought, and then we want to name the school of thought that it came from. Let's see if we can get these the first time around. So the way to improve social stability, number one, is that people should work to carry out a duty to humanity. What this says is that if everyone does their job and puts other people first, they have a duty to humanity, and things will be okay, basically. The quotation is, if there is harmony in the home, there will be order in the nation. Which school of thought does this come from? This is a thought process based on harmony, based on humanity. This school of thought comes from Confucianism. We will talk a little bit more about Confucianism here shortly. The second way to improve social stability is they should rule with strict, excuse me, is that there should be rule with strict law. That people need strict laws no matter what, that they cannot be expected to do what is expected of them to make society prosperous. The quotation here is, the universe is sacred. If you try to change it, you will ruin it. This again is a thought process that humans and people are inherently not great people to be around at all times. What school of thought does this come from? Well, this obviously comes from the legalism school of thought, that people need these strict laws and that this is the way that people are. If you try to change the universe, you will ruin it. The third way to improve social stability, do not interfere with the natural order. Its quotation is that laws exist to love the people. Rights exist to make affairs go smoothly. The school of thought that this comes from is Taoism. And we'll talk about Taoism, which literally means the way. So let's look now at our basic teachings of Confucius. And again, this Confucius philosophy is one that states that people should basically do what is asked of them, what is required by them through their humane rights, their humane privileges, to carry out the society and to make it prosperous. The Confucian way of thought was collected in what we call the Analects, a quote-unquote Bible of Confucius. It focuses on the political and the ethical rather than the spiritual. So Confucianism is not a spiritual guide to get you to a great afterlife. It is a political and ethical focus that governs the here and now. It focuses on this political and ethical rather than a spiritual. It also has an emphasis on duty and the 5 constant relationships, which we will look at. There's a call for humanity, compassion, and empathy, which I really like those 3 words. humanity, being kind and passionate to your human counterparts, that the world is bigger than you, and having compassion for other people's situations, and empathy. Empathy and sympathy are two different things. You can be empathetic or you can be sympathetic. Those are your words of the day, matter of fact. Look those words up if you don't know what they mean, and understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. And there was an advocacy of rule by merit, not by noble birth. And this is another democratic type of ideal, that you get to rule because you are worthy of ruling, not because you were born into it. Everyone who's born into it doesn't mean that they're, inherently capable of ruling. And rather, you should pass an examination. You should prove that you have the merit, the knowledge, and know-how to be a ruler. And so these are the basic teachings of Confucius. You're going to want to jot these things down on Confucius and all of our different schools of thought, Confucianism, legalism, and Taoism, as we move forward. Let's look now at the 5 constant relationships of Confucianism. The philosophy of Confucius addressed this key question. How do you restore order to a society in chaos? Remember, the dynasty just crashed, and now there's this period of imbalance of no control. So how do you restore order to a society that is in chaos? His answer to this question, the concept of duty. It became a pillar of Confucianism. Duty meant that people should subordinate their interests to the broader needs of family and community. No matter what your interest is in something, no matter what you stand to gain out of it, you should take a back seat, because there's things that are bigger than you. Your family is bigger than you. Your community is bigger than you. Your world, your nation, all these things are bigger than you. People had a duty to behave in a certain way toward one another. And if each individual worked hard to fulfill his or her duties, the society would function harmoniously. Confucius outlined these duties in the 5 constant relationships. Now, I look at this Confucian policy as a coach, that everyone has a job. Everyone has a job that they must do, that they must fulfill, and they must trust their teammates, their other humans, to do their job and to do their duty in society. And when you do this, you achieve harmony, and things will be okay. Things will turn out well in the end. And so, excuse me again. Let's look at these duties that he outlined in the 5 constant relationships. He said that the relationship between a parent and a child, the parent should be loving toward the child, and the child should be reverent, should respect his parent. And that is actually, one of our 10 commandments. Love your mother and father. This is one of the relationships that Confucius outlines. The second relationship is a husband should be dutiful, that he should do everything in his power to make sure that his family is in order. And a wife should be obedient to the husband. Ladies, I know. Ladies, trust me, I know. Guys are right now clapping their hands, fist pumping. Yeah, the woman needs to be obedient and subservient and do whatever I say. We live in the 2000s. This is an ancient philosophy. Women do have a fair say. From the older sibling should be kind, and the younger sibling should be respectful of the older sibling. That the older sibling one day will assume, if it's a man, will assume the reins of the family. If you're an older friend, you should be considerate to a younger friend. And the younger friend should be deferential. The younger friend should defer to that older friend. In other words, respect that person's opinion and understand that the older friend is trying to help you along your way in life. And in the topic of government, the ruler should be benevolent, and the subjects should be loyal to their ruler. Okay, now let's look at the basic teachings of Taoism. And the thing to remember with these philosophies, legalism, Confucianism, and Taoism, is that they're not religious or spiritual philosophies. They're just different ways of governing a country. Like Confucianism, it was concerned with the proper forms of human behavior and assumes that a natural order, the Tao, in the universe. It's based on the teachings of Laozi. They were collected in the Tao Te Ching, the way of the Tao. So just like Confucian had the Analects, Laozi had the Tao Te Ching, the way of the Tao. There was an emphasis on inaction, not interfering with the natural order of things. It basically is saying that everything happens for a purpose, that things are set up the way they are, and you shouldn't interfere with them. That the time continuum, the way that things are the way that they're going to be, and there's nothing that we could do about it, and that we should accept this natural order of things. All right, so let's look at the Tao Te Ching and Taoism. That's a lot of words on the screen. Don't fall asleep on me. The Tao Te Ching, the classic of the way of power. is the foundation for Taoism, a system of belief most closely associated with the philosopher Laozi. Taoism forms an important counterpoint to Confucianism in Chinese culture. It advocates a natural, mystical, and almost invisible style of rule, as opposed to the Confucian ideal of strict adherence to ritual and proper conduct. Taoism is closely associated with Buddhism in East Asia, particularly Zen Buddhism. Here's a quote from Laozi, the classic of the Way and Virtue. A state may be ruled by measures of correction or harsh laws. Weapons of war may be used with crafty dexterity, but the kingdom is made one's own only by freedom from action and purpose. How do I know that it is so? By these facts. In the kingdom, the multiplication of prohibitive enactments increases the poverty of the people. The more implements to add to their profit that the people have, the greater disorder is there in the state and clan. The more acts of crafty dexterity that men possess, the more do strange contrivances appear. The more display there is of legalism, the more thieves and robbers there are. Therefore, sages said, I will do nothing, and the people will be transformed of themselves. I will be fond of keeping still, and the people will of themselves become correct. I will take no trouble about it, and the people will of themselves become rich. I will manifest no ambition, and the people will of themselves attain to the primitive simplicity. Now, this is kind of out there. It's basically saying that the more and more laws you enact upon a people, the more and more crime there will be. The more and more that you try to help people out and bring them up, the more and more that poverty will become rampant. And so, in other words, and with war, the more and more acts of crafty dexterity with weapons, possessing more weapons and trying to rule through military force, the more and more war that there will be. Now, there is some merit to this thought process that if you keep promoting something, the natural adverse effect to that, the yin and yang, for everything that is good, there's something bad. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And the more you try to force this one reaction, the opposite reaction will manifest itself equally, just as equally. So that's why it says, I will do nothing. The people will find their own way. I will be still and I will be quiet, and they will themselves become correct. They will find their own way. I won't worry about it, and people will of themselves become rich. I will manifest no ambition, and the people of themselves will attain primitive simplicity. I don't know if you should trust people that much, that everyone will just fall in line and do what they do and everything will be okay. But at the same time, it takes all kinds to make the world go around. It takes the world takes thieves and criminals to make the world go round. The world takes kind people and loving people to make the world go round. That everyone has a role, everyone has a purpose, and by leaving that alone and not upsetting the natural order of things, the world will find its own way. Taoism versus Confucianism. Now we're going to start getting into our debate topics a little bit. How does Taoism differ from the Confucian work ethic? Well, Taoism teaches that the way to harmony is in action, not interfering with the natural order. Confucianism teaches that human beings have a duty to work hard to improve life. I kind of believe that more so. I believe more in Confucianism than Taoism, that human beings have a duty to work hard to improve it. If you don't fix something, if something's broken and you do not attempt to fix it, then how will it become fixed? Taoism teaches that if it's broken, just leave it be. It's broken for a purpose. It's broken for a reason. Don't interfere with its natural order. So understand our differences in Taoism and Confucianism. All right, here we go again with another long page of quotes and words and letters, and you're looking at this and you're flipping out and you're like, Coach Mac is crazy. Bear with me. Legalism. Han Feizi's take on legalism. The legalist doctrine of Han Feizi emerged in the 3rd century BC as the feudal Chinese power structure crumbled and war became a way of life. Han Feizi was a minor member of the Han royal family who had little luck convincing his rulers that Confucianism was out of date and a more authoritarian style of leadership was needed. The central tenet of legalism was that when times are hard, rulers cannot hope to lead by example. A ruler must implement harsh laws to prevent society from collapsing. The founder of the Qin dynasty attempted to implement Han Feizi's ideals upon taking control of China in 221 BC, but his government was very unpopular and he soon fell from power. Again, this is a dictatorial society, dictatorships, emperors. Just like we've seen throughout history, people tend to push back against very harsh rule. In order to get people to submit, so to speak, it has to be of their own volition. You can't force people to behave a certain way because everyone has free will. Here's our quote from Haim Vazi on legalism. To govern the state by law is to praise the right and blame the wrong. The law does not fawn on the noble. Whatever the law applies to, the wise cannot reject, nor can the brave defy. Punishment for fault never skips ministers. Reward for good never misses commissioners. Therefore, to correct the faults of the high, to rebuke the vices of the low, to suppress disorders, to decide against mistakes, to subdue the arrogant, to straighten the crooked, and to unify the folk ways of the masses, nothing could match the law. Now let's stop right there and digest all that. I like the quote, the part of the quote that says, punishment for fault never skips ministers. Reward for good never misses commissioners. The people, in other words, the rich only get richer and the poor only get poorer. To correct the faults of those who are in control and to stop the sins or the law breaking of those who are low, to suppress disorder, to decide against mistakes, you must have unmatched law. You must have a strict set of laws, a code of laws that people must adhere to, and you must administer the punishments. Let's carry on. To warn the officials and overall the people to rebuke obscenity and danger, and to forbid falsehood and deceit, nothing can match penalty. If penalty is severe, the noble cannot discriminate against the humble. If law is definite, the superiors are esteemed and not violated. If the superiors are not violated, the sovereign will become strong and able to maintain the proper course of government. Such was the reason why the early kings esteemed legalism and handed it down to posterity. Should the Lord of men discard law and practice, selfishness, high and low, would have no distinction. So in other words, everyone needs to be governed by a set of laws, and no one should be above this law, no matter their station in life, no matter if they're the most high or no matter if they're the low. That this legalist train of thought that everyone should adhere to these laws, and punishment should be swift and carried out without any favor towards where that person's station in life is. Then and only then can things become to order. And this is a legalist thought. So legalism is a very dictatorial school of thought. It is a school of thought that the rulers must rule with an iron fist, and that everyone must be subjected to these laws. So we've got legalism, we've got Taoism, and we've got Confucianism. Understand those three and how they oppose in three different directions. Think of it like a triangle. Each one's at the corner of the triangle, equal distance from the others, but as close as they are together, they're just that same distance apart. This is a picture of Qin Shi Huangdi. He orders the burning of books and the execution of scholars. Now, if you've had the honor, and I call it an absolute honor, of reading Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury in your English class, you'll understand this. In that book, it's a dystopian future where society is being repressed under a legalist state of law. And they burn books. They don't allow anyone to have books for recreation because they believe that books and media allow people to, or encourages people to think for themselves. And this is not what they want in a legalist society. So what we see in our picture is Qin Shi Huangdi sitting up there in his throne. He's the guy in the red hut up there in all white sitting at a throne. And he orders the burning of the books and the execution of these scholars, people who were teaching your own way of thought. And in this image, you actually see that they're being tossed into this burning pit, into this pit. The books are to the left, at the bottom left, and the scholars are being tossed into a pit at the lower right. Legalism was strictly followed during the Qin dynasty. Opposition to the Qin rule was not tolerated. This image shows books being burned and scholars being killed for their beliefs during the rule of Qin Shi Huangdi. Qin Shi Huangdi accused scholars of opposing his rule and confusing the common people. He ordered 450 scholars who had retained forbidden books to be buried alive. The emperor ordered all ancient writings, including poetry, history, philosophy, to be burned. The only books he permitted were those dealing with medicine, divination, or books foretelling the future, and farming. He outlawed all schools of philosophy except for legalism. So if you're going to be a dictator, you got to go over the top. If you want people to think and to behave a certain way, you go over the top. You burn their books, you bury their scholars alive, and you make an example of them because you're forcing them into a box. You're forcing them to believe exactly what you believe. You're not giving them their own thought process like Taoism would, that everyone should just leave it alone and people will do what they do, or Confucianism, where people are inherently good and things will work themselves out. Under legalism, it's a very dictatorial society, just like a Hitler or a Stalin or a Mussolini or a Caesar. All these dictators had to force upon their people a certain way of thought. And what always goes wrong with dictatorships is you can't change the way that people think through force. It has to be something natural. They have to be accepting of it. It has to be something that they want to do. So let's review now. Chapter 6, Lesson 1, Schools of Thought in Ancient China. Under Confucianism, it was a focus on the political and the ethical rather than the spiritual. There was an emphasis on duty and the 5 constant relationships. There was a call for humanity and compassion and empathy. There was an advocacy of rule by merit and not by noble birth. Under Taoism, like Confucianism, it was concerned with proper forms of human behavior and assumes a natural order in the universe. Excuse me. It was based on the teachings of Laozi. They were collected in the Tao Te Ching, or the Way of the Tao. There was an emphasis on inaction, never interfering with the natural order of things. And under legalism, it was a school of law. It held that human beings are evil by nature. It advocated for strong rulers, harsh laws, and stiff punishments. So there's our 3 debates. We're going to split into these 3 teams: a Confucianism, a Taoism, and a legalism team. I know it would be great if I could put you all where you felt the strongest, whichever philosophy you felt the strongest, but go ahead and get in your head right now that I'm operating under a legalist policy. You will debate and advocate for whichever school of thought that I put you in. This is a dictatorship, believe it. Make sure that you do study for your vocab quiz tomorrow or the next time we meet. Make sure you're doing all your GRAs. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, always email me. I'm here for you. I'm here to serve you. You guys be careful, be safe, have a good day.